All right, coming up on this edition of Today's Verdict, the City Council and climate advocates urge Mayor Adams to implement and enforce Local Law 97 rather than weaken it. Next up, an employment attorney talks to us about the writer's strike and if it will be resolved soon. Finally, ever wonder how people can resolve matters without a trial? A court attorney tells us more about the Alternative Dispute Resolution, or ADR. As you can see, we have much to get to, so stay tuned. Today's Verdict starts right now. All right, hello and welcome to Today's Verdict, the interactive show that gives you your legal rights and options. I'm your host and trial attorney, David Lesh. Well, Today's Verdict is always encouraging you to stay connected. Make sure to tweet me at David Lesh and hashtag Ask Today's Verdict if you have a question. And check us out at bronxnet.tv. New York City is at the forefront away about fossil fuels. Here to tell us more, we have Councilmember Carmen De La Rosa. Carmen, welcome to the set.
Thank you so much. Thanks
What do you
for
think?
having
It's
me.
nice, isn't it?
It's nice.
All right, let's get right into climate control and a little bit about Local Law 97. What exactly is Local Law 97?
So Local Law 97 was actually passed in 2019 by the previous city council that I was not a part of. Okay. But it's a law that while that council was passing it, I supported as a state legislator. And really what it talks about is the climate crisis. And there's a lot of opinions about the climate crisis, but one thing that I think most people agree on is that we have to move towards a more sustainable model for our city. I mean, if many people know like what's happened in our city with Hurricane Sandy, with the flooding, we've had flash floods. Last summer, I represent Northern Manhattan. My community had flash flooding for days on end. And so these are things we can no longer deny. These are things we have to confront. In 2019, the city council under then Mayor de Blasio passed Local Law 97 to basically establish a framework for a Green New Deal for New York City. How do we move from what we have now to a more sustainable model for our future? And that includes going away from fossil fuels and making buildings and the emissions of pollutions in our city decrease. The model is based on ensuring that the buildings that emit the most pollution into the air, into the environment, are changing their model. So buildings that are constructed in the city are built under certain regulations to make sure that they're compliant with this Local Law 97. So we're making sure that buildings are electrifying, that there's more LED certification, the way that we're using energy in our buildings. And part of it is also how do we then decrease the dependence on fossil fuels? This conversation has taken many, many different forms. The latest one is this conversation about how do we make sure that in this new council, we're strengthening Local Law 97 so that we can meet the targeted goals. And what the goals, some of the goals are, is that 60% of the buildings that are emitting the most pollution into the air, that are most dependent on fossil fuel, are buildings right here in our city. And we need to make sure that those buildings are curbing. And so they're changing their boilers, they're changing the systems within the building to make sure that they are decreasing the pollution that they're emitting.
Well, what if the building was built a long time ago, let's say in like the 1920s or the 1930s? Will they still be required to change?
Eventually, right? And so there's a plan. So 2/3 of the emissions that are being put out in the air are being put out by 60% of buildings in New York City. And some of those highest emitting buildings have to meet a goal by 2024. And so, you know, when we're looking at that, we know that this is going to take time, financing, resources in order to switch out boilers. We know that most boilers have a life term of about 20 years, some a little less. And so as those natural conversions happen, what we're saying is that we should convert the systems in these buildings to more energy efficient.
Well, it's obviously going to cost some money, which is understandable. Pushback is coming from the landlords, from what I understand.
Yes.
What have you been hearing from the other side?
So, you know, there is a cost associated, right? Every time you're going to make sure that a building is meeting these regulations, there's going to be a cost. The new boiler costs money. Being more energy efficient, there's a conversation happening right now about gas stoves versus electric stoves.
Yeah, we've had guests on before from the state legislators have been on here, assembly members have been on, and we've been discussing the gas stoves. My own building in Manhattan is debating constantly as to whether or not we should be converting to gas stoves. Everybody. What are your thoughts on gas
Yeah,
stoves?
I think that eventually, if we want to make sure that we have a healthy city, that we are moving away and depending on these fossil fuels, we will have to make those sacrifices, right? Of converting from gas stoves to now more modern electric. When you visit a modern home anywhere, most stoves are electric now.
Yeah.
And so it's going to be a culture shift. And I think that people are really clashing over that shift. But also there's an economic issue, right? And so one of the things that folks should know is like rent stabilized buildings, sixth floor walk-ups, which are traditional buildings in our city, don't have to meet these stringent goals right away. And also, we're trying not to burden tenants with the, major capital improvements that this will take in order to fund the changing from these boilers. And so, there is a plan. The buildings that are emitting the most pollution, they have to meet certain requirements by 2024, and then the other 80% have to meet the requirement by 2030.
What if they don't meet the requirements by 2024?
Then there could be fines levied against these buildings. And that is where we're seeing some pushback from the real estate industry, right? Because they already feel the burden of paying higher taxes in the city, and then also now the fear of fines. But the way that we see it and the way that climate advocates are talking about this is that if we are to preserve our city, remember, we are a city surrounded by water. If we are to preserve our city, we have to take big sacrifices now. And so the administration, the Adams administration, is now working on what those regulations look like, what the parameters look like, what are some of the concessions that will happen as these regulations are created. And so that is the conversation that's happening in the city council.
Tell us more that's going on in your district. What else have you been doing?
Yeah. Well, I am actually the chair of the labor committee. And so one of the things that is also adjacently related to this is the need to create new jobs in our city. And when we green our city, we're going to create green jobs. There's an estimate 65,000 jobs can be created by Local Law 97. That is something that I'm very interested in. In my own district, we've been battling high unemployment levels post-pandemic, the recovery of our city post-pandemic.
Has it come back or not really?
It hasn't fully come back. So we partnered with the Adams administration just last month to bring a hiring hall. Many of our city agencies are seeing high vacancy rates. And so we want to make sure that New Yorkers who are qualified are wanting to get into civil service, getting into public service. And so we had a big career fair in one of our schools. 3,000 people attended. Hundreds of job offers were made on the spot. And my community, Northern Manhattan, just south of here, is a community that has always been a working class community. We are dealing with many of the same issues that we're dealing in the Bronx. High asthma rates,
sure.
Recovery post-pandemic, economic insecurity for some families. And so as a chair of the labor committee, I am happy that we are looking at these approaches holistically, right? How do we provide good jobs with life-sustaining wages for the families that live in our community, while also, in the case of Local Law 97, providing a green economy that is accessible to all.
Let me ask you a question. Just, post-pandemic, do you feel that city is moving in the right direction now? I know, homelessness and this crime has been an issue. What are your thoughts in terms of your own district?
I think that we are traversing many crises together, right? And so the homelessness crisis, we have, in my district, we have a big opioid pandemic in itself, right? And these things are interconnected, right? Because those people that are unhoused are suffering from mental illness at times they're addicted to opioids. And so we're seeing all of those things come together. But one thing that I'm proud of is that the city council is working on different roadmaps in order to address some of these issues. Just last week, the city council put out a mental health roadmap to deal with the mental health issues that are happening. Post-pandemic, these issues have been exacerbated.
Yeah, I mean, the virus has really affected so many people in mental health-wise.
Absolutely, and think about the isolation.
The isolation, just the change in life.
Yes.
It's been very difficult for most people, and I think mental health awareness is so important.
It's so important. We have a great mental health chair in the city council. But I'm an optimist. So I believe that our best days are still to come, and I think we just have to continue to work together.
Well, we're going to leave it there with your optimism.
Thank you.
Hopefully you'll come back and give us a visit soon.
I will.
All right, we have to take a quick break, but up next, Attorney John Bell updates us on the writer's strike. You don't want to miss it. Stay tuned.
You're not going to get it all right. Just make sure you nail the big stuff.
Mama!
Like making sure your kids are in the right seat for their age and size. Get it right at nhtsa.gov/the right seat.
All right, welcome back to Today's Verdict. I'm your host, David Lesh. We're always encouraging you to stay connected, so tweet me at David Lesh. More than 11,000 writers for television and film went on strike, stating that their wages are stagnant and working conditions have deteriorated in the streaming era. Here to tell us more is employment attorney John Bell. John, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me on, David.
It's a pleasure. Well, it's a fascinating time, as usual, in the television industry. Where do we stand right now with the writer's strike, just as we sit here today?
So I don't see any immediate end in sight. I know the last strike started in 2007, went towards into 2008 and lasted about 100 days. Right now, this one started at the beginning of May, about May 2nd or May 3rd. The writers are doing what they need to do. By striking, they're bringing a lot of attention to the issues of why they feel a strike is necessary. They're looking for more pay. They want residual payments that they used to be entitled to, that they're not through the streamlining system. And they're looking for other benefits as well. For example, the AI, the artificial intelligence, they're concerned about that technology in the future replacing their jobs.
Well, let's make it clear. Any television show, any streaming service that you're watching, or even movies, these are writers. Writers are writing the content. Am I correct? They're the ones who are putting down the words on the paper. Am I right?
Yeah, writers are writing the content. That's absolutely correct. And what used to happen back in the day with series is that these writers had some job security in that they were hired for 8 or 9 months to do an entire season for the show. And if the show was resold or repackaged or there was a rerun, they would get these residual checks. The difference with these streamlined services is that they hire a lot fewer writers during a short period of time, and it's almost like gig work. And then when these streamlined services have these episodes just sitting there, the writers don't get any extra money for the time when customers or consumers are replaying, or let's say it's sold or played by another network. They don't get any checks, or if they do, it's very minimal, like a 1 or 2 cent check. So they're saying it's wrong. Over the course of time, over the past decade, writers have lost 23% of their salary based upon inflation and other numbers.
Now, why wasn't this thought about? I mean, streaming has been around, but certainly this had to come up where the writers they're working on all these episodes on whether it's Netflix or it's Hulu or wherever it is. Why wasn't this thought about at some point? What am I missing?
And that's a very good point, David. I don't know why. Of course, I wasn't involved directly in the negotiations, even though I negotiate a lot of different CBAs for other companies. I don't know why this hasn't been brought up in the past, but I can tell you right now, what they're asking for is $429 million a year extra for these writers. And although that seems like a lot of money, if you put it in perspective of the $429 million, Disney would be responsible for like 75 million, but their annual revenue is 82 billion. So that only equates to 0.091% of the revenue. So they're really looking for modest bump ups considering all the work that they do. They want a secure schedule as opposed to working at one place and then being fired and have to look for another gig.
How are shows being affected right now? Like, how is it affecting us watching? Is it? I understand there was no Saturday Night Live last weekend. Like, how is this affecting us, and is it going to affect us as the viewers?
So it is going to affect us as the viewers because we enjoy these series that are being written by these writers, right? So we like you mentioned, Saturday Night Live is not running. A lot of the late shows or all the late shows are not currently running. Most of those actors are coming out in favor of the writers. There are not too many public entities coming out in favor of the studios. They believe that the studios need to give more to these writers.
All right, so you've been on both ends of this. You've done a lot of negotiations. Maybe you could look at your crystal ball. Where is this heading? How much longer? And who's going to be giving in? What are your thoughts?
My thoughts are that it's going to last at least another 30 to 60 days because I don't see that they're close. Obviously, a deal eventually will be made. There has to be some compromises. But I do believe ultimately fairness will prevail and the riders will end up on top.
What seems to be the biggest sticking point, though? I mean, I understand streaming is an issue, but there's got to be more to it than just the streaming, because that would think you could work out the numbers at some point based on the revenue that's coming in on the streaming to Paramount or to Universal or wherever it's coming in. Is there anything else that's kind of mixed into this whole negotiation?
David, unfortunately, like most CBAs, it's all about money. They're looking for $429 million a year, while the studios have offered $86 million. So we're not. I know that you're a litigator. You've negotiated a number of times. I would say that's a fair amount that they are apart. Although there is going to have to be some type of bridge, because now with the strike, it certainly is putting pressures on the studios. So, and the writers, they want to get back to work, and I'm sure they're also writing at home. They just can't do anything. So as soon as this is over, I'm sure there's going to be all your shows will be back on air and running smoothly, but we have to get to that point.
What, you've been doing this for a long time. What is the tact in terms of negotiation to get both sides to reach some type of agreement? How would you be representing? Let's start with maybe you're wearing the hat of the studios. How would you take this and maybe take it home for them?
The best thing that you could do is get to the table. You'd have to have a neutral place. You invite the Writers Guild, you invite the studios, you have them in a locked room for however long it takes until they could get something done. If they need to call in a third party, mediator, arbitrator type person, that's fine as well. But if they're not at the table, there'll never be an agreement. So that's really the key, is going around the clock. Over time, people get tired, they make certain concessions. At the end, you have what's pretty much a fair deal. And again, these things constantly get renegotiated. 3 years from now, it's going to be renegotiated again.
Why is that? What makes you think it'll be renegotiated another time?
Every 3 years, from my research, every 3 years, this collective bargaining agreement gets renegotiated.
Which is, I guess, gets back to the earlier point I made. If it keeps getting renegotiated, and streaming has been around for so long, it's just hard to understand why we're even at this point. You would think instead of pennies on the dollar, it would be dollars on the $10. I mean, how has somebody not thought this through with all the money that's being made on all the streaming services?
David, like I said, you brought up a great point. I don't know the answer to that, but I could tell you that maybe they learned their lesson. Number one, inflation is killing everybody, so the writers are probably really feeling it, and now they're being more vocal about the fact that their pay decreased by 23% over the decade. And they're also learning their lesson because now they're bringing up AI, artificial intelligence.
Well, what do you think about that?
They're looking forward.
Do you think AI can seriously replace some of these writers, or is it just a fallacy?
Yeah, well, the argument is they're going to be feeding AI all these scripts from these writers that they've produced, or the scripts that they've written in the past. They're going to be feeding that to the AI. The AI equipment is going to be using that. The writers are not going to be paid for that, and then AI will be able to replace a vast majority of the writers. So they're looking down the road. Maybe they should have done that with the streaming services, and that's what's happening.
Well, let's see. Hopefully the AI won't replace you and I, but who knows? Listen, thanks for coming on. Maybe you'll come back again and give us a little bit of update on what's going on in Hollywood.
I appreciate it, David. Thanks so much. Have a great day.
All right, stay tuned for our last guest. We'll talk about the alternative dispute resolution. We'll be right back.
Every day, thousands of kids start vaping. And I can't let this happen to my kid. Of course, it's awkward to talk to your kids about the dangers of vaping. Hey, bestie, how's sketches, vaping? It's hard to get their attention. Ready? Go. Yes, look at that. You didn't turn yours over. So if you want to talk to your kids about the dangers of vaping, you have to get it trending. Right, Backpack Kid?
Let's do it.
First, invite your kid to do the vape talk. Let's try this. All right.
Why is he here?
Yeah, I gotta get it trending, honey.
Come on.
To the left. To the right. Let's go.
Oh, honey, can we talk?
Yeah, what's up?
I see a lot of your friends vaping.
Visit talkaboutvaping.org for tips on when and how to have the vape talk.
All right, ever wonder how people can resolve matters without a trial? Last week we spoke to court attorney Albert Levy about alternative dispute resolution, also known as ADR. Let's watch. All right, welcome to today's verdict. I'm your host and trial attorney, David Lesh. We have with us today a great attorney and a friend of mine, Albert Levy's here. He's a court attorney working in the Bronx courthouse. He's actually there today. Albert, how are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
Let's get right into it. Let's talk about this alternative dispute resolution program. Tell the viewers a little bit about it, if you could.
Sure. So alternative dispute resolution is a fancy term basically for resolving a case or a dispute without a trial. It's a way for people to get together. There's more than one way to do it, including mediation, which is what we focus on for the most part here in the Bronx. A neutral third party comes in, gets both sides together to the table. They put out what their issues are, and then they try to see if there's a way that both sides can walk away, if not thrilled, at least satisfied and able to move forward with their lives with the case behind them.
How did this program get to Bronx County? How was it invented, basically?
So this all started with, well, ADR goes back for decades now. And I think over time it has become more and more popular. It started with the courts in New York County, and then with the former Chief Judge's Excellence Initiative. She said that there should be an ADR department in every county. Here in the Bronx, our administrative judge, Judge Gonzalez, started the ADR program right in the middle of COVID in 2020. Things were much more difficult, as people recall. It was much harder for cases to move forward. And one of the ideas she had was that if people could get together and settle the case even via Zoom, things could keep moving. And so that's how it started. It launched in 2020. And since then, I have taken over the program this past summer. And that's where we are right now.
How do attorneys find out if they have a case that may be submitted to ADR?
So this is what I would recommend to anybody. We have an ADR website for Bronx County. It's live, and we'll share the link hopefully in some way for people. And basically, if you go right there, right on our homepage, first thing you can see is a little link, request for mediation. It's a simple form, 8 questions, something like that. Put in your info, and it comes to us. We don't tell the other side where we found out about it. We'll check in with you. And if the case qualifies, we'll let everybody know.
Take us into the meeting between you and the attorneys for the first time. What do you initially discuss with them when they first meet with you?
Well, and I want to say, by the way, it's not just attorneys that this is good for. If you're somebody who's watching, and you have a case in court and you're not represented by an attorney, we have a program specially designed for people without attorneys. And, obviously, if it's repeat players who, attorneys who've done mediation before, it's a little bit faster than if it's, somebody who is never been in that process before and needs a little more hand-holding, a little more explanation. What I'll usually do, I'll sit everybody down. Of course, I introduce myself. I explain to them a little bit about what we're trying to accomplish. And then I get the basics, the very basics of the case. It doesn't take long to see, to start just getting a feeling of where the conflict is, what needs to what hurdles need to be jumped over in order for the case to resolve. Sometimes the issue is really about the case itself. Sometimes the issue is about a miscommunication of information, some information that one side has not been able to explain to the other. Sometimes it's a personality clash.
Now, then I assume you take each party individually and try and work out the conflict. How does that work, really?
What you're describing, that process, we call it caucusing.
Okay.
And basically you can, it's definitely something that I believe in, because what'll happen is you'll see both sides, everyone's talking, everyone says the official version of the case. right? And then it's not until one side walks out that, you kind of see like a little maybe breath of relief. And then look, here's what the problem is, here's what I can't disclose to the other side, or here's what we're really thinking, et cetera. So that's one piece of the process, is you can have them come in back and forth. The other thing is I really try to emphasize having the attorneys tell each other things. Sometimes we'll talk just amongst ourselves, and an attorney will say XYZ about the case, or this is where I'm comfortable going right now, et cetera. And I say, well, why don't you tell the other side that? And I bring them in and they talk, and you can see the walls come down.
Now, do you hold on to each particular matter if it, more than one particular time that you're meeting with the parties? In other words, will you put the case over for a couple of weeks or a couple of months to work on it again, or is it a one-shot deal?
Okay, so if you're meeting with me, most likely, and I'm a court attorney in the courthouse, so certain cases will come to me that I'll mediate them as a court attorney. If you meet with me, I will usually you get 90 minutes. If it's a regular mediation, you can get a shorter time if it's through some of our other settlement programs like the pretrial part and things like that. But yes, we can put the case over and adjourn it. And also, I find that, short phone calls are very helpful. Keeping things going via email, just checking in whether people have done the things that they said they're going to do in the interim. And then what I want to say about our ADR program more broadly is that what the main service that we offer, in addition to anything that's in the courthouse, is that we have a roster of between 80 and 100 qualified pre-screened mediators who are giving free 90 minutes. And that's really one of the main pieces of the program. They will prepare for the case. They will have an initial phone call to, get the basic background and set up a session. And they will do a first 90-minute session, all of that for no charge. And if the parties want to continue because they feel like it's a productive process, but they need a little more time or another check-in before they're ready to finish it, then those mediators at that point would collect a fee that would be agreed on with everybody ahead of time.
Now, to be fair, is the program offered in other counties as well, or is it just Bronx County?
No, of course, it's in every borough in the city, and the goal is for it to be in every county in the state. I can't say for sure if it's in every county in the state now, but it's in most.
All right. Now, can I ask you about the New York Knicks, since it's a big game tonight?
Absolutely.
You have a prediction for us? What are your thoughts?
Oh, it's a tough game. It's tough in Miami. I just want the Knicks to win. I want them to win so badly. I want to see them win. And I
feel like the city could use it. Like we just could use a little bit of a boost. That's my reasoning for it.
Absolutely. And since 94, 2000,
yeah,
those old Knicks teams, it's nothing like New York City in the springtime when the Knicks are good.
Well, Albert, thanks for being here. Maybe you join us the next couple of months and tell us how the program's going.
My pleasure. Thank you.